Perfect. Awesome. So first things first, this is a question for all three coaches. I'm looking for a little bit of background. So when did you get into coaching, and what was it that pushed you to pursue the coaching side of sport? We'll start with Duan.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thanks, Allison, again for the great introduction and for having us all here. I started coaching 2 years ago, because I'm entering my third year now. So that would have been 2021, I believe, is when I started. And what pushed me into coaching, believe it or not, was actually a mentor of mine who used to coach the Auburn women's team many years ago. And his daughters all played at the Auburn basketball team as well back in their time. And so one of his daughters, who is my assistant coach for the last 3 years, they were looking for a new head coach, and they had reached out to me to see if I'd be willing to take on that role. And they had asked me if I would be willing to take on that responsibility. I was a little hesitant at first. I had never coached women before. Well, I've never coached before, let alone women. And it turned out to be the best decision I ever made.
That's amazing. And I love that the nudge came from a mentor, because our mentors are so important to us in sport. Joline, I'll go to you next.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for having me. So I started coaching right after my university career. I started coaching a club team, and I just started developing a new part of the game that I just hadn't focused on at all. And I just started developing a passion for coaching, and just being able to give back to the community was my first goal, because the game gave me so much growing up. So I just wanted to give back, never thinking that it would give me so much in return. So being able to do this as my full-time job now is an absolute dream come true. I have to pinch myself every day that this is my job. But yeah, right after I started coaching, I never looked back, and I've been doing it since.
Amazing. And Karen, can you share a little bit about what got you here?
Yeah, for sure. So I've started coaching twice. The first time was shortly after I retired. I also retired from my sport twice, so might be a trend. But my first time I started coaching, I coached the masters athletes, and I coached them for about a year. And I loved that experience at my own home club at Chima. But I decided, and I really kind of figured out, that I wasn't ready to coach. I wasn't ready to kind of transition from full-time athlete to full-time coach. So I pursued my regular career, which is speaking. And at the time it was doing corporate wellness programming for different organizations, and kind of stuck at that for a while and kind of put the coaching aside. And then after the pandemic, so last year, Christmas time, just before Christmas time, was when I went back into coaching, kind of dove in with the Comp Dev, got all of that certification done. Yeah, and I just really decided that coaching was right for me. And it was then now time to pursue that after not really feeling ready to come out of being an athlete back when I first tried it. So yeah, bit of a journey, but I love it. I love engaging with, I coach kids, I coach U16, and I coach also masters. So number of different age groups. So lots of fun.
That kind of leads me in a different direction than I was going to go, but I think it's interesting that all three of you kind of really didn't get into coaching until after you were quote unquote done with the sport as an athlete. So I'm curious, I'll start with Karen, since you were a professional athlete. How did coaching did coaching help you transition to that retirement phase? Because we all know that can be a really hard phase of life for athletes, especially for you, where it was your full-time job being an athlete. Was coaching helpful in that transition for you?
Yeah, and I think that's probably, I figured out, actually I got to do some sport broadcasting in the Rio Olympic Games and the Tokyo Olympic Games with CBC. And I discovered that I really enjoyed talking about the sport, describing the movement for people to understand. And that kind of really helped. It was very cathartic for me to talk about the sport and not be involved in it other than just kind of, paying attention to world championships and Olympic Games every 4 years. So I did enjoy that part. And I think that really helped me kind of put that athlete career, which was 20 years, very fortunate to get to have competed for Canada for a very long journey. Kind of put that to rest. I also wrote a book, and that was very cathartic for me too, to go through that process. But coaching, being able to interact with the different participants at the club and, figuring out what their goals are and how to meet them where they're at. And yeah, just helping them to figure out that movement of canoe kayak technique, or and start to achieve some of those goals. For me, it's a nice end of the athlete journey and into the next. And funny enough, people ask me if I ever wanted to compete as a masters athlete, and I have zero desire to do that. I paddled for fun a couple times this summer, but that's about the extent of it. I really enjoy just kind of doing other things. But yeah, so long answer, but that's the bit of the
great
journey.
Answer. Do Duan or Joline, do you want to comment on that? Kind of making that transition from athlete. There's a lot of identity linked to that, and I'm just curious, how did your identity as an athlete influence maybe the way you coach or your personal coaching philosophy? Either of you can hop in on that one.
Feel free to start, Joline.
Okay, awesome. Personally, I feel like I'm quite different that I was as a player. Like the way that I think it's because of the process that's behind the preparation of a season or a practice plan, or how I approach things with my team is really different than how I approached a season as a player. So I feel that I focus a lot more on long-term, like on the goals that we set, and I come back to that, and then I feel more calm and less, I guess, not emotional, but I'm more in control, I feel, as a coach than I ever was as an athlete. So for me, that's maybe a part of me that grew into this role that I'm really proud of. But yeah, I would say that I with experience, it just gets more solid when you're helping athletes just thrive in exceeding in getting their goals, accomplishing their goals.
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of I think the question for transitioning, when I finished at the Mount and I was done playing, I knew that coaching could be something that I would be very interested in. I actually had another mentor at the time at the Mount who encouraged me to get into coaching. But at that time in my life, I wasn't necessarily going to be able to just transition automatically into coaching. I knew that about myself. I still felt like I was in good enough shape to play. It's just that you can only play so many years. So I knew in myself that I was going to have to maybe do something different for a few years and then regroup and think about going into the coaching stream at some point, which turned out to be a great decision that I made. I was able to focus on education. I went and obtained my law degree, and I'm in the position of where I'm at today, which was fantastic. But then along that journey, because I have good people in my circle who support me, They always kept an ear out. And then that mentor I spoke about years later down the road, when he heard about the opportunity to get into coaching, he kind of basically convinced me and said, look, like, it may not be the ideal situation right now, but every coach has to start somewhere, is basically what he said, right? And so if you just take on this role right now, which is what I'm in, the head coach of the Auburn basketball team for the women's side, then the world's your oyster after that. So it was nice to be able to take that time off, get the things in my personal life accomplished, and then to get into coaching. And now I can really devote a lot of time to it. I take a lot of pride in it. Ever since I've been coaching the last 2 years, going on year 3, I've been challenged every day by my girls. Just, the awareness that I have to have as a male coach versus coaching, women at a certain age. You have to be very sensitive to a lot of other things that you otherwise wouldn't have to think about if you were coaching young men. So to me, I take a lot of pride in being in that position, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being in that position. So my philosophy is always just trying to be aware of those things and just try to be sure that, for example, the lead assistant on my bench is a woman. So that way, if there's things that are happening at practice that I might not be able to recognize those social cues right away, she can, fill that gap and educate me on it. So that way I may not perceive a player to be walking in the gym in a bad mood and just not wanting to be here when maybe something happened to her at like an hour before that practice and I didn't, recognize the soldier cue of that. You know what I mean? So I've had to get really educated on that piece. So my philosophy has always just been to learn more and more and more about how to coach every individual, even though it might be slightly differently one-on-one, it's still equal across the board because some of them receive messages differently than others.
For sharing that. And Karen, I'll kind of ask you, how do you feel like your identity as an athlete informs your own philosophy as a coach, or does it at all?
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, it's the recognition of it's a balance between working really hard, which is what I did for a long, long time as an athlete, and kind of being patient. And that was a really hard thing for me. I'm still learning that thing. And just kind of holding space and having grace for not only our athletes and our participants, but for ourselves as coaches. And I think that's the hardest learning for me with being a coach is that, because I naturally kind of want to drive forward, push the agenda, work hard, stay to the program. And we all know as coaches that that's not always the case. And oftentimes that's not ever the case that we can do that. So I think I learned a lot of amazing things as an athlete, how to approach training, how to compete, how to be confident, and that whole piece. And I think that comes into my coaching as well, is as part of my philosophy is I want to help folks become more confident and competent on the water. And that's kind of, that's what drives me. So I think it's absolutely part and parcel with who I was as an athlete, but there's a new me as a coach that's much more patient becoming.
Did anyone else want to add something to that before I move on? Like, I love, Joline, that you immediately said, like, me as a coach is quite different from me as an athlete. And Duan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I will just add that I will echo Karen's comment when it comes to patience, and Joline's as it's a difference between the player and the athlete, because I know as a player, I very much am someone who strives on being challenged. Like I actually would prefer the coach to not give me all of the praise on things I do well. I'd rather the coach harp on the things I'm not doing so well, because that's what motivates me. But now being in the coach's seat, you realize that not every athlete is receptive to that. Some athletes actually may need a bit of the praise first to keep them motivated to then do the things better that you want them to get better at. So for me, those are the main discrepancies for me as the athlete and the coach. So patience, what Karen said, is a key word there for me that resonates with me.
I have a question here from Ken Bagnall. Hand is raised. And you're muted, Ken.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for participating, either as speakers or those who are learning. A question I have and all of you can answer it if you please, is the differences that you see with young people today that you're coaching compared to when you were a participant, which is not too long ago for some, a little bit longer for others, and then how you're dealing with that kind of reality of what youth are going through today, again, as compared to when you were competing yourself. Anyone?
I can start us off if you'd like. I think it's absolutely a different time that we're moving through now, and youth, not only youth, but all participants athletes are moving through that as well. I think I'll speak to the youth athlete because that's kind of what I grew through and am most passionate about. I think they are dealing with a lot of stress right now. I think it's, stress from lots of different areas. It's they've come through and are moving through COVID and all of that kind of stress, but also social media, which was non-existent when I was an athlete. Well, at the very tail end, I don't want to date myself too much, but at the very tail end, social media became more prominent. But that's something that youth deal with. I think also youth athletes are much more aware and in terms of their own health and well-being. I think they're more educated on mental health, mental well-being, but also physical health. So injuries, awareness of injuries. Back in my day, I swore I wouldn't say that, but when I was competing, it was, you kind of just did the work. And, if you had a little injury, you may or may not have told your coach. And you kind of just kept on going, and things weren't really talked about on the mental health side as well. I think youth athletes today are much more aware of that. And I think that's a positive thing. But the other side of that is I think they also deal with a lot more stress, as I mentioned before. So that's where I'll leave that comment if someone else wants to jump in.
I completely agree with you, Karen. I feel like there's a lot of pressure around even social media, and it has a big impact on younger athletes. And for me, I guess the way that I try to address that is really with communication. It's really important for me to build a good relationship with my athletes so that they know that I want what's best for them, and and to create a safe environment, a safe space for them. And that, I guess, is what we can do to help them feel at their place and help them thrive.
I do agree with the components that you guys spoke about. I think that social media has driven the pressure and the stress level through the youth athlete to a whole new level than what, probably any of us went through when we were at those ages competing in our respective sports. Just because it's in your face all the time, 24/7, and they get access to it at such a young age where they can get really consumed at what other people think versus, just doing the work, which is really what we were defaulted into doing because we didn't have that access to that social media type thing, at least not to the level that it's at today. I think just to add to that piece though, which I hope doesn't come across as a bad way, but I do see a little bit of with that access and being more accessible to vocalizing your opinion on any sort of airway, there becomes a little bit more of a sense of entitlement there, with the youth athlete at times, where they almost just feel a little bit more entitled to be able to like just speak their opinion or to be able to say things in a certain way, which I've tried to, stress with my athletes, like, okay, like, you are at this point in your life right now, you have a lot more to go to get to where you want to get to. You're going to have to, meet a lot of people along the way and, go through so many doors to get to this end result, whether it be in the sport itself or in whatever career you want to do. But just keep in mind that there are many people, generations ahead of you, who have done this work already. So, just make sure you're being respectful and that you're not just thinking that you can just snap your fingers once and then you're just going to be able to jump from here to here. Like, you do have to do the work and understand why you're doing the work. So we do try to have those frank and open, honest conversations, but we do try to do it, as you said, Joline, in a very safe and like open, non-judgmental sort of environment. So sometimes we just have off days where rather than practice, we do a team session where we talk for about an hour and a half about certain things that we want to discuss, right? Just to try to really get them to be open-minded and thinking about that fact and not to be so consumed about what other people are saying. And don't be a trend sort of follower, be more of a trendsetter, I guess, if you were to separate the two.
Great question, Ken. Thank you. And for anyone else, feel free to raise a hand if you have a question along the way. We don't have to hold them till the end. I like that all of you have kind of brought up the importance of relationships and making space for that and creating that kind of culture of trust with your athletes. So I'm curious, through, now that you're looking at your sport through the lens of coaching, have you learned anything about your sport or about dealing with human beings that you didn't already know that it took coaching for you to learn? Anyone can hop in on this one first. It's a big one, I know.
Anything I did?
I can start if you want. Again, I learned, and I'm still learning, that regatta days are so long as a coach. When you're an athlete, you have your few races that you're entered in, and you can go back to the hotel or home or wherever you are for the remainder of the day. And as a coach, you're there, you're on all the time. It's all in. And just learning the involvement of our sport at a much deeper level, and kind of, that whole appreciation of everything my coaches did for me and for us, right? That whole just acknowledgement of, wow, like it's a huge investment of time and energy and passion. And I guess that was a big learning for me this year, is kind of being thrown into that whole regatta schedule and their multi-day regattas and things like that too. It was a big learning, but also learned about people, right? Like the so many folks are so passionate, and they have their goals, and wherever they're at, you want to help them achieve to the level that they feel comfortable. And that's what I've learned so far, and I always think it's a continuous journey, so there'll be more to come.
I definitely have learned a few things. One would be somewhat to what Karen mentioned, is the behind the scenes work that a coach has to do, and the amount of hats that you wear as a coach. You always hear about it and you kind of have an idea about it, but until you're in the seat doing it, you don't fully appreciate it, in terms of having the budget in place, making sure that uniforms are ready, making sure that travel plans are already coordinated, making sure you're, depending on what age group you're coaching, thinking for your athletes. So how many school days can they even miss to participate in some of these tournaments? Like all these logistics that you got to go into play, practice planning in advance, team bonding set, like a lot of things that you want to shape your season. Because the way I like to coach, I guess this goes back to the philosophy question, but I like to try to coach the way that I would have liked to have been coached, right? And I've had some great coaches, but there were some things about the way that they coached that I would have felt you could have done it this way. So if I think they could have done it this way, I tried to do that. which requires a lot of work, which I don't know if the athlete, kind of going back to Karen's point, truly appreciates, but they wouldn't because they're not in that seat until they're done, and maybe they come back as assistant coach role and they see how much you're actually doing, right? So I've learned that there's a lot of behind the scene pieces, and if you don't have a good support team behind you, it can be really hard.
I completely agree. That's what I have as well. It's like the management, the organization around. You're thinking of a coach, you're thinking practices, you're thinking tournaments, games, but it's a lot more than that. It's around the clock, and you really have to have a passion for it. You have to be organized. You have to have, for me, it's the goals, and just having everything surrounded and like coming back to that really helps me have a um, clearer understanding of where I'm going, what my next move is, and communicating with the athletes as well is really important to me. Like, my season is pretty long. Like, we go from September to May, and well, September to March, but I mean they go to school until May. So it's just I can have something planned, but then they have exams, and then they come back, they're exhausted. We can't follow through with our whole practice. It's just like the daily management, and it's just the communication is really important to have their feedback so that they're able to develop at the speed that we want them to develop, and be able to attain our goals. But definitely the management and the organization is still working on it, but into building that culture.
Yeah, I agree with all of you, and I agree. Karen made a point that, it's a journey. The learning is like nonstop. I think for me, the biggest thing was like the building of culture, or, if you value compassion in your gym, if you value empathy in your gym, if communication is a value, you can't just expect people to bring that to the table. Like, some of those human elements have to be trained as well and have to be modeled. And I think for me, coming from being an athlete where, I thought I was a pretty good teammate. I thought like culture and team bonding and communicating with my teammates was just something that happened if you were a good team. But I think as a coach, I've just realized, like, no, you have to build all of those. Those are skills that you need to train as well. And I think that was a huge learning for me as I transitioned. Roz, thank you. Roz has put a question in the chat. So she says, so much of what we do as coaches is actually teaching of technical skills to athletes. High performance athletes often come to their sport with natural talent and not always have had to analyze the technical aspects related to performance. Have you found this transition to coach challenging in this regard, and how have you worked through this? Anyone have an answer for Roz?
We talking about like technical skills, you mean? Like the actual technical pieces?
Yeah, she says a lot of high performance athletes come with natural talent, but haven't had to analyze the technical aspects of performance. So Roz can clarify if I'm incorrect, but I think she would mean like, people who are just athletic and kind of get away with being athletic, but haven't really dug into the technical until they reach a high performance level.
I don't mind starting on this one, just to kind of get started for you guys, if you don't mind. But I think from a technical piece, it has been different because you now have to be, I guess, the teacher, and you have to teach someone how to do a specific skill the way it should be done, but you have to be able to describe that in words for it to come across to them, to be able to know how to do it. And then the next step is, can you demonstrate it for them so that way they can actually see how it's supposed to be done? Because it's one way to just say it, but then can you actually demonstrate it? Because if you can't even demonstrate it, it's going to be really challenging to get them to even learn that piece. And some of it's just through terminology, right? Like sometimes they don't really learn the terminology of a reverse pivot in basketball at a young age. So you tell them to do a reverse pivot without showing them, they're going to look at you with two eyes and have no idea what you're talking about, right? But if you can actually show them what a reverse pivot is and how you would like move your body a certain way to get to where you need to get to, then they have a bit more of an understanding. And then at that point, it's just about repping it and doing drills, initiating on it, and I always just like to put an emphasis on the skill. So if we're doing footwork drills, I put an emphasis on the footwork. They always end up doing, say, layups at the end of the drill, but I don't even look to see if the layup went in or not, because I'm just watching their feet and seeing if they're doing the right footwork. So I just try to really harp on like those little things as best as I can, but I'm not perfect. There's other skills of the game that I'm still trying to make sure that I get better at myself first before I really try to put more emphasis on them with the players. Because I'm just a proponent of, if I can't demonstrate it, I'm not going to then try to expect someone else to do it.
Yeah, I think Duan brings up such an important point, is the demoing, but also, you know, if you're not showing the movement, you can also use video. There's so many different ways that you can help kids learn, and you know, different ways of learning. And I think that, you know, figuring out which way works best for someone, I think has been a journey for me too, to kind of figure that out. The technical side, you know, I had my own technical cues when I was an athlete, working on those things, and my own coach cues that Chum would kind of yell out and I would attend to. So I think I probably have adopted some of those styles as well as some new ones. I think there's also lots of benefit too. I'm an assistant coach and I have a head coach, and we're on the water at the same time. So hearing different things from different each of us, I think, helps the kids to kind of figure out that technical component as well. So if Kevin, he's our head coach, explains something in one way and perhaps that's not getting through to the athlete, then perhaps something that I say might help as well. And there's also there's not only like the, you know, body positional kinesthetic technical cues, there's also like, you know, mindset, like how do we want to feel? Does it want to feel aggressive? Do we want to feel powerful? Like those cues all help with the technical side of things too. So figuring out what words to use intentionally, I think has been a bit of a learning for me too.
Completely agree with the feeling. It's so important for them to know how it feels. Yeah, absolutely. I would also add that, like, coming back to conversation, just like if we're gonna switch a certain technique or get an athlete to do something a different way, even though it might change the result of the ball or momentarily, but on the long run, she'll get better at it. It's just the understanding of why we want to switch it and why you can't continue doing it this way, so that they actually engage in that process of change, and they understand why we want to do certain things.
Thank you for that question, Roz. I'm wondering if any of the three of you would feel comfortable sharing a challenge. So something, as you've made this transition from competitive athlete to being on the coaching side of things, what is a challenge that you've faced along the way, and how did you work through it?
I can go first. For me, the biggest challenge was because being an athlete, you're going through that with your teammates and you're going through the season with your teammates. But as a coach, when I first started, I felt really lonely. I felt very alone. I felt very unable to really communicate what I was going through with anybody that could really understand where I was at that point in time. So for me, building like assistant coaches, having people around me that are going through it with me, that I can communicate and like go back and forth with game plans or things we want to do or try, that has been really important to me to evolve as a coach and get better at my job. It was really something that I was missing when I first started, but having that has really helped me become a better coach.
Did you want to go, Karen, or did you want me to go?
You go for it, Duan. I'll go last.
Go ahead, Duan.
Okay. I guess for me, there are many challenges that I face. Some that I don't think I probably should share. But one that I was thinking about was when I first started 2 years ago. I was fortunate enough to get a team that was mostly grade 10 and 11. So if we were to skip to today, the majority of those girls are now in grade 12 and some have now moved on. But when I first started, a lot of the girls who are on my team, I was, very blessed with a very talented team. We had a great, core of group of players who I felt like, we could be very competitive this year. I see it being a team where I don't know what the other teams look like in the league, but based on who I know I have on my team, we should be able to make a run for the provincial title if we, play our cards right and, consistently work hard along this journey. I did a team meeting at the beginning of the year to kind of set the standards of the team, our code of conducts, our rules, our principles, that sort of thing. And two of my better players, you could arguably say, were the two best players on the team on any given night. Basically just sort of did something outside of those rules right before our first league game of the year. And I was kind of put in a position as a first year coach where, how do I hold people accountable? And I had to, it hurt me till this day when I think about it to make the decision to not play them in that game. But I had to hold them accountable to our, how things are going to be run in this program. And we did not win the game. And throughout the rest of the year, in hindsight, looking back on that season, if we were to win that game, it would have totally shifted the way our rankings went at the end of the year, which could have shifted who we played, which could have changed everything, right? All those what ifs that we get every year as a coach. But it was still the right decision that had to be made. And until this day, it was probably a better decision that I made it for them because they then basically jumped on the bus early and, fell in line. And then the rest of the year, the standard was set, right? So it was a tough moment in the moment and it still hurts thinking about it, but that was probably a hard challenge I had to face.
My biggest challenge is noticing how I'm doing and understanding burnout. So for me, just appreciating that, I kind of mentioned this and alluded to this earlier on, but when we're in the season and even when we're not in the season, when we're coaching, we're all in all the time. And I learned in the last week, honestly, that you have to pay attention to your own health and well-being first and foremost. And I speak on this stuff, like I present this, and I do lots of work on resilience. And I think it's more about, I'm plenty resilient, and so are my athletes, and so are my fellow coaches. But it's more about holding space and having grace, I think, in lots of times. And I think that for me has been the biggest challenge. Coaching in canoe kayak in this particular sport, in the summertime, it's up to 12-hour days. And it's, 6-7 days a week, sometimes without a break. So it's especially demanding. And I think I just didn't take enough time to kind of come down and recover from that. And I had a bit of a health scare last week, but I'm happy to report I'm feeling good now, still doing some ongoing testing. But I think the most important thing is recognizing burnout and also asking for help and being okay with that. So I think those have been the biggest challenges for me to work through and continue to work through. But yeah, it's hard when you're an Olympic athlete to slow down. And sometimes your body makes you slow down, and that's not the best scenario. So yeah, I think putting ourselves first as coaches, and also modeling that and teaching that for our athletes, I think is a really important learning for me. But it's been also the biggest challenge for me too. So yeah, I share that with space, and I hope that resonates.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think, yeah, you're right. Part of it is like just taking care of ourselves, or the saying that, you know, you always hear you need to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help other people, but it's also modeling that behavior, right? And while the athletes may not notice, because I'm sure you're a pro at pushing through difficult times, yeah, they if we want to harp on them to take care of themselves, we need to be able to do the same thing. It's just very hard. And that kind of brings me to, like, Joline, you, all three of you at some point have mentioned a mentor or someone that has pushed you to coach or offered you support. Joline talks about the loneliness, and Karen, you know, talks about being able to lean on other people and ask for support. So I'm curious, do you three have mentors? Like, do you make space in your coaching life to talk to other coaches or a past coach of yours maybe? And have you received any good advice from those mentors that you'd like to share?
I can keep going.
Are you still lonely? I was gonna say, yeah, Joline, are you still lonely, or is there someone who go ahead?
Me
Yeah.
or Joline? I can go.
Either
Joline.
one. Yeah, either one. Totally fine.
Yeah, mine's really short. Yes, I have mentors. I coach with a head coach, and then my old coach is still coaching, and our coach community is pretty small in canoe kayak, so I keep in connection with them. Yeah, I wish there were more females coaching, and able to kind of connect with them, but that I think is coming, hopefully. And but yeah, it's the canoe kayak community is great, mentorship spirit, and yeah, I think it's good. We're a close-knit group, and yeah, I'm learning lots from them, and hopefully giving back to that group too.
Same thing for me. I try to connect as much as I can with other volleyball coaches. I love bouncing ideas and going back and forth and just talking about what we're going through. I think that's really important. And I have a coach that, even though I had when I was younger, and he had a big impact in my development as a player, but also just as a person. And even though he passed several years ago, I still have him in the back of my mind, and he helps me a lot more than a lot of, like, that he would ever know. But just having those people that have an impact on your life can help you throughout a lifetime. And I think he was my coach back then, and he still has an impact today. So yeah, just having mentors, I think, is really important.
I have several mentors as well. I have a few mentors who are previous coaches of mine. I have a mentor who is one of my mentors in a coaching program that I'm currently enrolled in. I have, and then I have a few other mentors who are more so not mentors for necessarily basketball, but just mentors through who I've met along my journey through education, who just happen to be sports fans. They're into, like, psychology. They're into debating about different things when it comes to basketball. So, like, they are also people who I lean on just from a more of a sociology aspect of things, things that you could do outside of the sport to help with team bonding, as an example, just to get different ideas on things that you can always introduce as a coach. So I'm always just trying to learn. I'm trying to reach out to as many people as I can in my network to constantly just be giving advice. If I was to tell you the advice I've been given, we'd be here all day. So, but just to say, there has been a lot of good pieces of information that a lot of mentors have relayed to me along my journey.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I want to open up for questions from anyone else. If anyone would like to ask our panelists a question, or if panelists want to ask each other a question, if anything has come up in this conversation. And a question, for the panelists or for anyone on this call is also, like, are there resources, are there supports that you need more of as a coach? are there things that you would like to see offered that might help support you in terms of, coaching network, in terms of education, anything like that?
Yeah, I was just following up on a few of the comments, especially two topics: female coaches and coaching female athletes. Kind of that on, so no one's lonely out there in the coaching world, so we can, how best to develop a community that may go beyond your sport. For example, of female coaches who can have a continuous conversation about the challenges that are uniquely faced in that area, or again, more broadly in coaching female athletes. Like, what would you see as something that would be helpful to carry that conversation forward?
I don't know if there's like a direct answer to that one. I just think that for me, just if I can only really keep it from me, but I just think that the more sort of educational pieces that I can, I guess, be exposed to just help shape my growth. As a coach who's coaching youth women, would be very helpful to me. I used to always say, like, 2 years ago, I can't really coach the woman athlete the same as I coach a man athlete or a boy athlete. But then, having a conversation with my mentor the other day, it was more of the mindset of, it was not that you coach them differently, it's just that you just have to think differently, right? It's a totally different mindset. And that's kind of been my focus more this year. It's just not necessarily that you got to coach them differently. You still have the same expectations and the same standards. We're on the same wavelength. It's just more about, I have to think differently in terms of like maybe the certain words that I would use to describe a technical skill, or the way that I would describe how our philosophy is going to be for the year, and just trying to make sure that there's no sort of trigger words or things that could, that I'm not sensitive to in the moment as a man, because I'm not thinking about those things, but it could be very sensitive to a woman, right? So just trying to always be up to date with those things is what I think I just want to continuously grow in. So I guess maybe to answer your question, that is what I would need, is there's just more people who are experienced in those areas. It could be on the court or off the court, just to help me grow. If there's books out there that people in here think that I should be reading, that I should definitely get, I would love to get recommendations. I'm an avid reader, so just things like that for me, just constantly evolving and learning.
I think
Joline,
I'll just jump in here. I think just having the opportunity to connect, I think is so important. Whether it be time, as we know as coaches, is of the essence, and we don't have much of it. But lunch hour or 1 o'clock or whatever it is good timing. I think virtual, we've learned a lot through virtual connection during COVID. I think taking advantage of virtual connections and opportunities to connect on the, whether it be a group of female coaches or a group of coaches coaching females. I think that that's something that we could think about engaging more frequently, just to have, people be able to drop into the space and feel supported, and just knowing that space is there, versus, you're all alone on Lake Binoc or wherever you are. I think that's a great prompt, Ken. So thanks for bringing that up. I know it's been thought about, lots, parts of it, have been tried before, but I think, knowing what we know now on the virtual side, I think things are easier to do on a more consistent basis than, coming together at a hub, or maybe you come together once a year or something like that. And you pair it with a youth event or something, where it's a good incentive for everyone to come physically. But yeah, I think opportunity to connect and having the space, whether it be virtual or in person, I think would be really helpful.
Thank you. I have one more question in the chat that I just want to quickly get to if we can. Sherry says, what are our thoughts on how we can encourage more athletes to transition into coaching? I know we're getting close to one, but I just think it's a really great question. So
I can maybe chime in. I think it's really, really important, and it's our job to introduce them or talk about, especially at the university level for me, like just to talk about after their last year, like what does that look like if they're interested in refereeing or coaching, or what if they want to get involved, like to try and connect them with people in the community. That can help them through that transition, I think is really important.
Yeah, I agree with Joline. I think everything she said is on point. I do think that to go with her point, maybe we would just also, while we're getting to know our athletes, depending on what level they're on, if it's high school or university, just having them, as we're doing these one-on-one sessions or team meetings, and just getting them to start thinking about the idea of coaching, right? Really, like maybe making a full meeting about just what coaching is, where it can take you, because sometimes as the athlete, when you're playing, it can only take you so far, because there's obviously luck involved that happens no matter how much hard work you put into it to get to sometimes where you want to go. Not saying that you can't get to where you want to go, but what if there's a severe injury that happens one time, just that one off, and it just sort of derails your career, right? So on the field, let's say playing is one thing, but from the coaching aspect, you can really do it for as long as you want, and getting them to really understand that you can make it what you really want from a coaching aspect. Whereas when you're the athlete, there's probably a certain level where you can compete at the highest level, and then at some point, you're probably not going to be able to compete anymore, right? So just getting them to understand, like, how much do you love this game, and do you really love it, and could you see yourself being a coach? And if they start presenting themselves like that person, then you could start trying to introduce them to more resources about coaching, stuff like that, maybe.
Yeah, one thing I'll just share.
I love that.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I don't want to jump.
No,
you go and then I'll go. Sorry.
I was just going to quickly say, I love that Joline said it's our responsibility as coaches to engage that conversation with the athletes. So carry on.
Yeah. And to that point, both Allison and Joline, is that one of the things that Bannock, our canoe club, does in the summertime is we have a youth mentorship kind of coaching program. And it encourages the younger athletes who are, may or may not be thinking about coaching, but they can assist, they can be dock hands, they can help, they can come out in the motorboat. So we're actually, as the head coaches and the assistant coaches, we're actually mentoring them, but it gives them the opportunity to explain the sport. It gives them an opportunity to see the sport from a different set of eyes as well. And then it gives them that leadership opportunity, hands on the ground kind of thing. So I know that's been a great success. And lots of athletes transition into coaching from that program, and they may be full-time summer coaches, or they come into coaching at a more later in life too. But that's something that has worked in our sport. I miss in the regular season, I miss having those youth coaches, but they're very active in our club in the summer months. So I don't know if other sports do that, but it's a great way to engage kids and to spark that idea of thinking about coaching.
Yeah, I love that. And then there's some great comments in the chat here as well. Lynn sharing about an experience she had with a coach. Her coach coached high school boys team and invited players to come to their practices. They thought they were going to be extra bodies, but she was really introducing them to coaching. So yeah, I love that. Thank you, everyone, to our panelists for some really great conversation, for everyone who showed up on their lunch break today. With some of the things that we had in mind, I'm just going to quickly let you know that we've got some opportunities coming up that might be of interest to some of the coaches on the line. So I'm going to fumble with my screen right now and let you know that we have podium performance sessions coming up on these following dates. So November 8th, enhancing performance through team culture with a couple of mental performance consultants from the CSIA. We've got on the 13th of November, the art of setting boundaries, the coach life balance. So that's, I think, an important one for all of us. On the 22nd, we have blank the uncontrollables, which is a session with another mental performance consultant about whether we're managing those, whether we're navigating those, whatever that word is that you need. And I am actually going on tour with Simon Taylor, one of our mental performance consultants from the CSIA. So this is for Nova Scotia coaches only, but we will be visiting all the regions. And the session is on mental recovery for coaches. So you can check out our social media or our website for some of the links on how to register for those. And save the date. Atlantic Coaches Conference is going to be in Halifax, April 19th and 20th. And of course, reach out to me anytime for the folks on the line if you have ideas of how we can engage with each other. And yeah, really appreciate everyone being here, and thank you to our panelists for your insight. It's really helpful for all of us. So
Thank you.
oh yes, applause.
Thanks.
Have a lovely Wednesday, everyone, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.